Hey guys, so I am here for my birth story video. I know it has been so long. Kaden is 2 months old now, and I am just now getting to this. I did upload my labor and delivery video, so if you haven't seen it, go check it out. So first of all, as everybody knows, my due date was October 14th. I did make it to my due date, and leading up to that, I was trying everything I could to naturally induce, and it just wasn't happening for me. So the day before I turned 40 weeks, I went on this like killer walk around our local high school for like 2.5 hours, and I was like powerhousing walking, and I was climbing the bleachers, and I was just like, come on, like I'm on team, let's get baby out. And I was hoping and praying that night I'd go into labor. Nothing. The doctor had said at my 39-week appointment that if I had gotten to my 40-week appointment, that he wanted to schedule an induction for the night of October 16th. So he would have been born on the morning of October 17th, 2017. And I really didn't want to get induced, but I was kind of at the point where I was over being pregnant. I was having horrible pelvic pain, and I just kind of was at the point where I was gonna do whatever the doctor had said. I was pushing to not want to be induced because I really wanted to go into spontaneous labor naturally. But I kept hearing horror stories from people personally that I knew that didn't get induced, and things happened. So I had decided at the end of the day that if he wanted to induce me, that I was going to let him. So I was all set and ready to go into my induction on the night of October 16th. So the day of my due date, we woke up, we went to breakfast. I took Elena to go see My Little Pony with my parents, and we just kind of like hung it at home, had a very chill day. And that night, I was going to bed, and I had told Alan all prior going up to that night, like, come to sleep with me, come hang out, like, let's go to bed early together. And then that one night of my due date, I told him, hey, stay up as late as you want tonight, because it'll probably be the last night that you get to stay up late for a while, because baby will be here soon and you have to help me. So he stayed up until like 4 in the morning that night or something like that. And the night of October 14th, when I went to sleep, I put Elena to bed, and I went to sleep, and around 2 in the morning my stomach started hurting. And the night before my stomach was hurting too, and so I was just like, oh, I'm sleeping on my stomach, kind of like odd or weird, and I'm just so pregnant, it must be hurting. So at 2 in the morning I woke up, my stomach was hurting, and I was just like, oh, whatever, I'm gonna go, like, change position and go back to sleep. So I went back to sleep, and then I want to say around 3:30 or 4, my stomach started hurting again. And Alan had come to bed at this point, and I remember waking up and I told him, like, oh, my stomach hurts so bad. And he's like, that's weird. Like, try to get some sleep. So I said, okay. So I went back to sleep. 4:30, I woke up again, and I'm like, oh, my stomach is hurting. And then it, like, dawned on me. I was like, maybe I'm in labor. And I was like, no, there's no way I'm in labor. Like, it's not going to happen for me. So I went back to sleep, and then at 5 o'clock I woke up again, and I'm like, wow, this is starting to hurt like every 30 minutes. So I downloaded a contraction timer on my phone, and I was like, all right, I'm not going to say anything to anyone yet because I don't want to like get excited and then it's nothing. So I laid in bed and I started timing them, and they were about, at that point, every 15 minutes, I want to say, like 10 to 15 minutes. It wasn't like consistent, but they were like coming semi consistently. So I'm like, okay, well, I know if you lay down sometimes, like, they'll come, and if you get up and start walking, that they'll go away, like Braxton Hicks. So I woke up at like 5:30 in the morning, and I came out into our kitchen over here, our little kitchenette, and I got a glass of water, and I was like, okay, I'm just gonna sit here and have some water, see if it makes it go away. And it didn't. So at that point I'm like, all right, I don't want them to go away, like, let's get them going. So I started walking up and down our stairs that we have here, and I just kept walking up and down, like saying, like, come on, let's get this going. And they kept coming, and so I went into the room around 6:30 in the morning, and I told Alan, I was like, hey, I think I'm in labor. And he's like, oh yeah, and he was like, okay, well, let me know. And he just went back to sleep because that whole week I kept telling him, like, my stomach hurts, and he's just like, oh, this is another, like, false alarm, it's not going to be it. So he went back to sleep, and I kept walking around the room, and they kept coming and coming. So I'm like, okay, this is it. So at 7 in the morning, I walked downstairs. My mom was outside. She had woken up for the day, and she was outside just kind of like looking around, picking things up. And I was like, I think I'm in labor. And she went, like, really? Like, and I was like, yeah, I think I'm in labor. So I'm like, I'm gonna go upstairs, take a shower, and see if that makes it go away or not. So Lena had woken up at this point, and she came in the room, and I told her I was gonna take a shower, and she was like, can I take one with you? So I'm like, yeah, sure. So we got in the shower, and while I was in the shower, I kept timing my contractions, and at this point they were coming like every 10 to 12 minutes. And I want to say it was like 8:30 that we got in the shower. And so I sat in the shower for a while, and the hot water just like ran on my back, and I was letting it relax my body, and they kept coming and coming. So at this point, I told Alan, like, I think it might be real, but I'm still not sure. I was kept playing labor denial because I didn't want to get my hopes up and think like I was going into labor on my own if I wasn't. So Alan finally got up, and he started helping me time the contraction since I was in the shower. And at this point I was like, okay, like, they're getting like enough that I want to like not be in the shower anymore. So I got out of the shower, got dressed, got Elena dressed, made the bed. And I think Alan still didn't realize like how bad I was in labor, because he was like, I'm tired, I don't want to make the bed. And I was just like, come on, you need to help. So we decided that we were going to go downstairs and go for a walk. So if you actually look at my labor and delivery video, you see me and Elena walking in circles on the street. That was at that point what was going on. So we had taken just a walk around our block. I was kind of circling on one street there, trying to get my contractions to like come on more, and they totally were. So at that point, I'm like, okay, let's go back to the house because I don't really want to be outside anymore. It was a beautiful, gorgeous day, and it was kind of getting hot out. So we went back to the house, and my mom and my dad were there. Dad was like, oh, like, are you in labor? Because my mom hadn't said anything yet. And I was like, yeah, I think so, but I'm still not sure. And so I labored at home a lot, mostly in our kitchen. I was sitting on like the little bench that we have down there, and I kept walking around our island. And again, there's footage of that in the labor and delivery video where I'm hunched over going like through my contractions. And from, I want to say, like 10 o'clock at that point until about 1:30, I was laboring in the kitchen, and I was just kind of having water as much as I could because I knew once I got to the hospital that was going to be over. I was having some protein bars and just kind of like anything that I could think of. I think that morning I had a bagel for breakfast, so I was trying to get as much food and water in my system as I could before I went to the hospital. And then finally, like at like 1:30, people started saying maybe we should go to the hospital. And I'm like, no, I'm fine. It doesn't hurt that bad. And my mom had made a good point where she was saying, yeah, but the last time you were induced, so you don't know like what regular labor pains feel like. Like maybe this is bad and you just don't realize it yet because Pitocin makes labor worse. So I had that in my mind. I'm like, yeah, that's true. I don't. So I kind of was laboring on my ball for a little bit, not a ton. Alan at some point left to go get McDonald's because he was hungry, and got Elena something before we headed to the hospital. My mom stayed home with me. And Elena was so amazing, you guys. So amazing. Like, she could have been my labor coach. She was helping me do my contraction timer whenever my stomach was hurting. She'd come over and give me a hug and just hold me and like rub my hair and tell me, Mommy, you can do it. And when my back was hurting, I was having back labor, she was pushing on my back for me to help kind of like counteract the contractions. She was amazing. She was such a sweetheart. So she just kind of kept herself occupied, colored, helped me out, ate her lunch before we left. She got dressed, got a little backpack ready of goodies to take to the hospital. She was so cute. Like, I couldn't have done it without her, honestly. Like, I swear. At times when everyone was busy doing things and like trying to get stuff ready and just do whatever, she was always there with me. So she was my little best friend through all of my labor. Elena, amazing girl. 2 o'clock, I said, okay, like, I think it's time I start going to the hospital because I don't want to have this baby at home. It was starting to hurt a lot, and I didn't want the baby to be, because the baby was posterior. So I had gone to a chiropractor like weeks ahead of time trying to turn them. I kept sitting on chairs. I was doing the bouncy ball hip rotations. Nothing was working. So baby was posterior. I had back labor. I knew it could put baby in distress, especially if my water broke. So I'm like, let's just go to the hospital just to make sure. So we headed to the hospital. I told Alan, like, hey, you should tell your parents that we're headed there. So he called them, and I had one contraction in the car, and I remember I was like, ah, and Alan's dad was like, is that Kayla screaming? And he was like, yeah, they hurt so bad at this point, and I was in a car, and it was so awful. Elena went in the car with us, and my parents followed. And then right when we got to the hospital, I was like, let me out of the car, let me out of the car. I was going to have another contraction. So I kind of just like collapsed in the passenger seat and leaned over into the car and had a contraction there. And then my mom came and grabbed me and walked me to a bench right in front of the hospital. And then I had a contraction there while my parents and Alan got all of the stuff out of the car, like the hospital bag and all of those things. Get a wheelchair to wheel me in. I'm like, no, I can walk. So we walk in. I'm like, hey, I'm having a baby. They tell me to go up to maternity ward. And right when we were waiting for the elevator, I had a contraction. So I got on all fours on the floor and I was like trying to breathe through it. And some lady walked by and she's like, oh my gosh, are you okay? And I'm like, yeah. My mom's like, she's in labor. We have a girl in labor. And she's like, okay. She's like, I just want to make sure you are all right. So we get in the elevator, we go up and they let us in. And then right when I get to the nurse's station, I have another contraction. So I like leaned down on the bar and I was like breathing through it. And they were like, oh, she's pretty far in labor. So at that point, they got me a wheelchair, wheeled me into my room. They checked me, got me admitted. And when I arrived there, I was 4 centimeters dilated. And I was like, oh, I felt so defeated because I was like, I'm only 4 centimeters dilated and it's hurting so bad already. Like at this point, I couldn't breathe through them. I was like almost screaming through them. and so And so I was just like, okay, but I can totally still do this. They were asking me tons of questions, and at one point they'd ask me, like, do you want to sign a form for the epidural? And I was like, no, don't let me sign it because then I'm already halfway there. We called my sister. My sister came. She was there. Alan's sister came. And inside the actual room, it was just my mom, my sister, and Alan and I. And then Elena stayed outside with my dad, Alan's parents, and his sister. And so I was like laboring in there, and we got there around 2:30. And then the nurses just kept coming in and like kind of checking. They kept wanting to do cervix checks, and I was like, no, like I don't want to get checked because I don't want to know what I am. And the nurse had made a comment saying like, you have to let us check you at some point because the doctor's a half an hour away. And if you're like 7 or 8 centimeters, we need to call him because if we don't check you and then you end up having this baby, then we're liable because the doctor's going to get mad at us that we didn't check you and call him to get here in time. And I kind of joked with her. I'm like, it's fine. You can deliver the baby. Like, just don't cervix check me. I was like, my first daughter, I was 4 centimeters and went to 10 centimeters in literally like 10 minutes. And I was like, my baby came fast. Little did I know this one was going to come just as fast, if not faster. 4:30, I want to say like it was probably like 4:35. I finally told my mom, I was like, okay, fine, just let her check me. Like I want to get it done and over with. So she came in and checked me and she's like, you're a stretchy 5 centimeters. And I'm like, what does that mean? And she was like, you're 5 centimeters, like almost 6, like somewhere around there. So I told my mom, I was like, I have to get that epidural. Like I can't do this anymore. It hurts too bad. I'm in too much pain. Like just give it to me. Like I want to lay down, relax. Like this isn't worth it. So she called the nurse and I'm like, yes, like I want to get it. Like let me sign for everything. And they're like, okay, but we're going to have to put the saline lock in you because I originally said don't give it to me. So I'm like, fine, just do it. Like whatever you need to do. I can't take this anymore. I was holding on to my sister like you see in the labor and delivery video, and I was just kind of like had my head in there and I was just trying as hard as I could to get through them. And I remember thinking when I told her I wanted the epidural, I'm like, oh, I asked for it way too late because I was in so much pain. I was like, I can't take another contraction. If I have to do one more contraction, my body's going to literally like give out. And so I'm not even kidding, I had like 2 contractions and I was like, this has to be like the end. I can't wait for the guy to come here and put this in my back. They're way too bad. And then the third one came, and my body just completely opened up. I went to 10 centimeters. I was screaming. I could feel the baby drop in me. And all of the nurses ran in, and she's like, what in the hell's going on in here? And I was like, I have to push. I have to push. The doctor wasn't there, obviously, because she had just checked me. I started to stand up, and she's like, no, don't stand up. And she went like this, like under my leg. She was like, your baby's gonna fall. So I like lay down on the bed. They didn't have time to put my legs in stirrups. They just put my feet straight up onto the bed, and they're like, don't push, don't push. And I'm like, I have to push. It hurts so bad. And I was screaming, and my mom was like, look at me, like, just try and breathe, calm down. And I was like, I can't, it hurts. Like, it was so much pressure, so much pressure. And at this point, I was thinking in my mind, like, crap, now I'm for sure not going to get an epidural. Like, this is happening. I'm going to have to do this now. I was like, there's no turning back. And the nurses are like, don't push. And I remember from Elena, not pushing hurts so bad. So I secretly was kind of pushing a little bit, but not like leaning up pushing, because I was still flat on the bed. They didn't even have time to like incline my bed to get me in position or anything. And 5 of the nurses were in there, like two of them were standing by me. The rest were running around the room trying to get everything prepped and ready for him to come. I was sitting there, and I just felt him coming, and they're like, don't push, don't push. I'm like, I have to, he's coming, like, he's coming now. And all of a sudden he just like started, I could feel my body just pushing him out, and he like wanted to come out. He was ready. And then right when he was coming out, my bag of water popped, and it literally went everywhere. The nurse later on had told me, she was like, I was like, did my water break? And she told me, she was like, yeah. And she's like, it's gonna take weeks to get off all the walls. So my water like literally busted. And they told me, they're like, honey, like, you have got to like calm down and get him out. Your baby has meconium, and you've got to like push him out. So at that point I was just like super concentrating, and they're like, it's an emergency, we got to make sure your baby's okay because he could be in distress. And so the baby literally shot out of me. His head just like popped out. I could feel like a huge like pressure, and then it just like was done, and I was like, I knew his head had come out. And so they're like, don't push anymore. And then the rest of his body was kind of sliding out. His feet were still in me, and I could feel his feet kicking inside me, and I was like, ow, it hurts. So they took him out. Alan didn't even get to cut his umbilical cord. The nurses did it, and they rushed him over and sucked out his lungs and everything. And I remember just sitting there, and the nurses were trying to see if my placenta like would fall out on its own, because they weren't technically allowed to deliver it. The doctor had to do it. So at that point they put my feet in the stirrups, and I just sat there for like 20 minutes until the doctor came. And everyone was waiting outside while they like undid his lungs and everything. And then as soon as they made sure he was okay, they put him skin to skin on my chest, and I sat there and waited with my legs just in the stirrups for the doctor to get there. And when he finally arrived, he delivered the placenta, and that part hurt because I was no longer like numb and fresh from the baby coming out. I had been sitting there forever, so I was shaking, my body was in shock, and I had a 2nd-degree tear, he ended up telling me, and I was just sitting there for like 20 minutes. So when he did get there, he delivered the placenta. He gave me shots down there to numb me, which hurt because I didn't have an epidural, so I felt everything. I got like 5 shots, and then he stitched me up, and then he left, and I was able to nurse Kaden. He nursed so good the first time that I nursed him. He was on my chest, and he was going like this, turning his head, and all of the nurses even were like, oh my gosh, he has like really good head strength, like look at that. They were so impressed, and you could see him rooting. He was like trying to find it. So I'm like, okay, he wants to nurse. So I put him down right away, and he nursed, latched like that. He nursed for 45 minutes, and eventually I was like, all right, let's like get Elena in here. So Alan went and got Elena, brought her in, and she was the first one that got to like hold him, and we just had time together, which you saw in the video. And then once Elena got to like spend time with him, Alan's family came in, and everyone got to see him and stuff. And he ended up being born at 4:45. So it was like, I got checked, 5 centimeters, 3 contractions later, born, and he was born at 4:45. And he weighed 6 pounds, 8 ounces, and he was 21 inches long. So he was our tall little boy, and we were shocked because we really thought that he was gonna end up being like this big baby because I looked so big being pregnant. The doctor said that he was gonna be bigger, and he was an ounce less than Elena. So that was really that was a surprise to all of us. So yeah, that's my labor and delivery story. It was super traumatic when it was happening because it happened so fast, so fast. I literally was laying on the side of the bed, and I remember just like being like like that because it hurts so bad. And in my mind I was even like, calm down, like you're yelling, you're screaming, you can't be doing this. And I remember after apologizing to the nurses, like, I'm sorry I yelled. And they're like, oh, honey, they're like, that's not even bad. She was like, most of the time when people yell, they have really colorful language, which I don't. So she was like, you weren't even that bad, which I was like, okay, thank goodness. And then, yeah, everyone left that night. Alan went and got us some food, and we just hung out as like a little family and brought him home the next day. And it's been 2 months now, so Kaden'S doing really good. I am planning on uploading monthly videos of him, of what's going on, so I have those to upload. I haven't wanted to upload them yet because I wanted to get this video up first. That is my labor and delivery story, my birth story. I hope you guys enjoyed it. It was super crazy experience, but now I know I have my babies really fast, and that's just what my body does. So if I ever have another one, we know get to the hospital, because otherwise I'm going to be delivering at home, which was another thing. When I first arrived, she was like, oh, you're only 4 centimeters. She was like, you might want to come back when you're like 7 or 8, because if you're here, we're going to make you stay hooked up to the fetal monitor, because baby was kind of distressed, and they thought that like the heartbeat was like as low as that they would want it to get. And she was like, if it gets any lower, we're gonna have to do a C-section. And I was crying, and like, that's not the thing to tell a mom when you're first going in, because I was already stressed out that I was gonna have to get a C-section. And they say, oh, baby's kind of distressed if it goes any lower, so they're like, we have to keep you hooked up. And she's like, you might want to come back when you're 7 or 8 if you don't want to be hooked up. And at that point I'm like, no, if baby's distressed, like I need to know, like baby's obviously first. And thank God I didn't leave and come back, because if I had, I probably would have had him at home or in the car, because I never got to 7 or 8 centimeters. I went from 5 to 10 in 3 contractions. So I've learned it wasn't a freak accident with Elena. That's what my body does. So I hope you guys enjoyed the story, and I will see you guys later. Bye.